Cloy, sorry, Sophie. So today we're going to talk about careers in the charity sector, and I've got three really brilliant panellists with us here today. So we have Dr. Joanna Cloy, who is Senior Project Manager at Fidra, Dr. Hannah Symons, who is Trusts and Foundations Manager at Chester Zoo, and Dr. Chris Jeffs, who was previously Engagement and Outreach Manager at the British Ecological Society, but has recently moved to Oxford Careers Service. So we're really excited to have that perspective with us here today. And then before we kick off, sort of a bit more background on each of our panellists. So Joanna has a PhD in environmental geochemistry and joined Fidra in June 2022 after working as a soil researcher. As a senior project manager at Fidra, Joanna delivers, monitors, scopes and designs science-driven environmental projects that focus on reducing threats from pollution and habitat degradation. She completed her PhD in environmental geochemistry at Edinburgh University in 2006. And after her PhD, she worked as a biogeochemistry of soils research fellow, and then as a lecturer in ecological sciences at Edinburgh University, before working as a researcher at Scotland's Rural College from 2011 to 2022. Her key research areas at SRUC were agricultural soil greenhouse gas emissions, carbon and nutrient dynamics, and she also taught Edinburgh University postgraduate and undergraduate students and delivered soil guidance and knowledge exchange workshops for farmers. So Hannah, with a background in chemistry, Hannah completed her PhD at the National Oceanography Centre, University of Southampton, in isotope geochemistry, investigating the application of the boron pH proxy in diatoms to our polar oceans, and remembers the GGRIP meetings fondly, so do check out our annual conference as well. Her desire to help find solutions to tackle global challenges like climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution led her to join the philanthropy team at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in 2018. Building on her philanthropy career, Hannah has just joined conservation powerhouse Chester Zoo as their new Trusts and Foundations Manager, helping to prevent extinction around the world. And last but not least, coming from an ecology research background, Chris completed his PhD in a postdoctoral position at the University of Oxford's Department of Zoology. He then career switched from academia in 2018 to lead public engagement and career development work at the British Ecological Society, a charity and learned society. His work here involved organising public exhibitions and events, delivering large-scale school outreach programmes, and delivering career development training for students, academics, and professional ecologists. Chris has very recently taken a new position as careers advisor for researchers at the University of Oxford Careers Service, where he focuses on supporting postdoctoral research staff to develop skills and explore careers outside of academia. So like I said, really great to have Chris with us here today. And all of you, thank you a lot. Okay, and so to start with, that was plenty of talking from me. I'm going to ask each of you just to go around and introduce us, tell us a little bit more about your job role and what it is you do.
Shall I kick off?
Yes, please, Joanna, thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for introducing me. So I very recently switched over from academia to work for Fidra, this environmental charity, where I'm a senior project manager. And I guess the key tasks, the key role that I play is scoping new projects for Fidra, and the overall aim is to reduce chemical and plastic pollution in the environment. So as a soil specialist, I'm currently scoping soil projects, and we're looking into maybe trying to reduce microplastics in agricultural soils. But yeah, of course, it's very different from academia because it's more about kind of working with stakeholders and communicating. So all the skills that you gather as a PhD student doing presentations at conferences or writing maybe a blurb for a website or writing a report, it's all really, really useful. So of course, I don't have to teach and mark students' assignments anymore. But my kind of day-to-day tasks are a lot of kind of meetings with stakeholders and emailing stakeholders, trying to kind of push for change, I guess, working with policymakers, working with industry to try and find solutions to reduce pollution. But as you might imagine, we can sometimes get ignored by industry because they may not want to change or adapt, and they maybe just see us as an environmental charity that are just going to expect them to kind of jump through more hoops and stuff. So yeah, it's very different from academia, but it's really challenging and interesting for sure.
Brilliant, thanks, Joanna. Hannah, I see you've unmuted yourself.
Perfect. Oh, the lights just come back on. Yeah, so I've just within the last month started my new job at Chester Zoo as their new fund trusts and foundations manager. So really it sits deeply within their fundraising team, and I'm working closely with the conservation, the science, the fieldwork and the education teams, essentially to get the money in so that they can do what they need to do to create the impact that we want to see in the world. So working with those teams to create compelling narrative, communicating that impact in different ways, in grant applications, in reports, as Joanna just mentioned, reporting is a big part of charity work, I think. And yeah, building relationships as well with major funders to essentially achieve the zoo's conservation master plan towards preventing extinction. That's what this organization is all about. So it really feels like I am actively making a difference in the world, which is what I really love about charity work.
Okay, shall I introduce myself? Yeah. So I got two hats on today. So like Hannah, recently switching. I started last Tuesday. So my new job is very, very, very new. But for my previous role, I was at the British Ecological Society. So that is a charity that leads policy work, our education and public engagement work as well. But we're also a publisher as well. So we publish scientific research and we provide training and conferences for academics through all career stages as well. You may hear me sound like I'm still working there because this is what I'm used to saying when I'm doing these talks. But my role was mainly, it started as I switched out of a postdoc doing ecology research in climate change and tropical community ecology. It started as science communication and public engagement. So organising big exhibitions at museums and with New Scientist Live, which is in the Excel Centre, at small community centres as well. So bringing it into communities for free. Building partnerships with those bigger organisations to try and get them to invest in our exhibitions. And the main thing was, of course, training up early career researchers and students and everybody who's working in ecology to communicate their science to publics and other organisations as well. So that's what I did, was I trained people in science communication and public engagement. So that was my career development side of things. And then I built partnerships and secured grants and funding to get that creative stuff out there at venues all across the UK and things like this. But where my heart was, I loved that creative side of things, but my real heart is with widening access to education. So I come from a low income background, and particularly I benefited from a lot of bursaries and grants that got me into university and through some of the barriers that getting into ecology. And I imagine geology and geosoc and all of your careers that you have similar barriers. That's where my heart is, to help people overcome those kind of barriers to career progression. So I would work with donors to found low-income support bursaries for undergraduate and graduate students. And that's the thing that really gets me going, is to help people do that. Over the 4 or 5 years I was there, my interest in that career support side of things just grew and grew and grew and grew. And I realized that it had always been there from undergraduate and all the careers talks you do and schools visits you do, whatever it may be. And so I took the plunge and I've switched to Oxford Careers Service now, because they were I'm very fortunate that they didn't need you to have a careers guidance qualification, which can cost tens of thousands of pounds and years of work. They want you based on your experience. And I was lucky enough to get that job. So I've started now where I'll be helping mainly postgrad postdoctoral researchers develop their skills and explore careers outside of academia, as well as inside as well. That's where my heart is. Career switching is helping people navigate that kind of thing. But also I'll be working with their graduates and undergraduates for those low income support bursaries and scholarships and things like that. So if you've got any questions for either of those kind of directions, public engagement, career support, even ecology careers and things like that, please do ask. And learned societies are fantastic, as we know. So thank you.
Brilliant, thank you everyone. So yeah, in the audience, now that you've got a bit more of a sense of sort of where our panelists have come from, if you have any questions that you haven't submitted already, please just pop them in, and I think we've got a good chance of getting through everything today. So yeah, just ask away. I'm going to jump straight in with the audience questions that have been submitted, and ask. So this may be more or less relevant to some of you. Maybe if it's not directly relevant to you, you sort of know through colleagues' experiences. How do you sell grant writing experience to a charity sector panel, given the amounts of money in academia which early career researchers are generally awarded in small grants is a lot smaller than in charity fundraising pots? And Joanna, you're straight in, so.
Okay. So yes, so I would say for Fidra, we're in a fortunate position. We don't actually have to request donations from public. We just have to convince trustees that our ideas are good ideas for new projects. So it's kind of like a funding body, I suppose. But having the experience of knowing how to design and deliver projects is critical when you get a grant of any size, I guess. So that's the key experience that was useful for me getting this job, and just having, kind of understanding of budgeting and people, organization, and just making sure you deliver projects, really. I don't know whether that really answers the question, but just to try and highlight, any grant writing skills are very useful because it shows that you've got an understanding of how to think through a project from start to finish and the kind of risks involved and stuff. So yeah, I'll let someone else jump in.
I'll jump in. Yeah, I totally agree with Joanna. I think from a fundraising career, I think any grant writing experience is experience. So it's interesting that this question particularly focused on the amount of money, assuming that charity fundraising pots are very large. It depends on the charity. I mean, I specifically have written grants from kind of £2,000–3,000 all the way up to £4.5 million. And the thing that kind of links all of them, no matter what the amount is how you get the idea across. So I think that the most important thing is that narrative about this thing that you're writing a grant for is the most important thing that needs to happen right now. This is the impact it's going to have. What is that compelling story? And yeah, just demonstrate the difference that money would make to that project, I think, is the key thing. Slightly different angle of an answer for that question. I hope that helps.
Well, I'll just add to Hannah's there. So similar to Hannah, so moving on to a charity, I was involved in applying for anything from a couple of grand up to 4 million as well. It's the same process as Hannah said, it's the same ingredients. It's that, what's the impact you're going to have? What difference are you trying to make? What is your budget? Like Joanna said, what is your budget? And very clearly outline that. Who are your partners? Who are you? And so when you look at a grant application, they may be different in how they're presented. It may be an online form. It may be a written Word document, whoever. They all have the same ingredients. And so you can use your skills that you've used as an academic to say, I've done this, it's for a different purpose, but the ingredients are the same. And so that's a really good thing to do. And also, just like Hannah said, small grants are always vital in charities as well as the big ones. And in fact, you probably have a higher hit rate and more regular successes with the small ones because there's more of them. So you really need to have a scope and think about where those small pots are as well as the big ones, because that's what keeps you going and allows you to test small things to then go on and do a big grant. So yeah, your skills as the academic, whether it's small grants or big grants, they're both really vital, and it's those ingredients, that's the transferable skills you put across in your interview or your cover letter or your CV.
I just thought of something to add as well, which was, if you're writing a grant for a charitable project, for example, actually your skills as an academic in distilling quite technical information sometimes can really come in handy, because some of the projects I've been involved in, you're almost like the go-between person. So you're kind of like taking all this very technical, super amazing sciencey stuff, going, right, what is the story, and then putting it out and getting people to understand it in that way. And I think that is a skill for someone who has been in academia, to kind of understand that sort of link, if you like. Yeah.
Cool, thanks everyone. Just to sort of, I guess, come at that question from a slightly different angle, mostly for Hannah and Chris, who sort of, you sort of started you joined charity a little bit earlier in your academic careers. When you were going through that process of applying for jobs, was that sort of grant writing experience something that they were very keen to hear about? So at interview, in your application, did you have to give evidence of grants won or evidence of winning money?
So I go in because I know Hannah's got the more relevant experience in terms of the fundraising. So a short one for me was, it wasn't an obligation of my kind of role in public engagement and career development. We had a fundraising and development manager, much like Hannah's role, I imagine, who led that kind of work. But I had done that, and so it was icing on the cake stuff. It was, I can do this. And I did then go off and do my own exploring and finding grants and securing big ones and small ones off my own back, as well as in collaboration with the dedicated fundraising team. So I would say, if it's not an essential criteria or a desirable criteria in your job description for what you're applying for, you can still sell it, because they'll want you. And the smaller the charity, not always, but the smaller the charity, typically they're not as lucky to have a Hannah in their team, and therefore your skills are really essential to try and get those pots of money. So really do sell it. But Hannah will have way more experience about this.
It's funny you should say that, Chris, because I actually think when I interviewed, so my first role actually in the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, I applied to be like a bid writer and a prospect researcher. So really kind of digging through Google and all kinds of different things to try and find people who were appropriate to approach to give us money, or organizations, that kind of thing. So I came across that particular role because I had been in 8 months of writing my thesis, and I thought, all I've done is write and research for 8 months, so this is very applicable to this role. And at that point, I don't think I'd participated in grant writing, but I had never written an entire grant before by myself. So if you have grant writing experience, amazing. If you're going for a fundraising role specifically, I mean, they couldn't ask for more. I think I know most fundraisers that I've come across kind of fell into fundraising in a weird way. So I wouldn't say that having grant writing experience is like a sort of holy grail, if you like. Like it's great to have if you have it. Definitely consider a career in fundraising, because I think you can definitely help charities directly achieve their goals. And for me, it's all kind of a mission-driven organization is a big motivation of mine to work for them. So yeah, I think that answers your question, Jess. It's great to have, but you don't have to have it.
No, that's really, really helpful. Joanna, was there anything extra? I gave everyone else a second go, so do you want?
No, in the interest of time, I'm happy to move on.
Okay, so we'll move on to another one, which is sort of on the job hunt angle. Do charitable organisations require volunteering with them or other similar charities as an essential criteria? And I guess from your experience or what you're aware of would be really useful.
Okay, so I can tell you that in our very small team, I mean, there's only 10 of us that work for Fidra. one of the project officers that I manage, she did actually work for Wildlife Trust and did lots of volunteering. She had maybe 2 years worth of volunteering experience, so that really helped her. She did lots of citizen science, but I wouldn't say you have to have that kind of, it's not essential criteria, but it just really helps show an understanding of the kind of work that charities do, I would say.
Yeah, totally agree with Joanna as well. I'd say absolutely not. Not every charity even has volunteers. Ellen MacArthur Foundation, we didn't have any volunteers at all. It was all paid staff. If it is kind of a well-known large charity or a charity that you specifically have set your sights on, I'm sure volunteering for them kind of throughout perhaps a PhD study would look really good on a CV if that's your ultimate goal. But I think the key that I've seen for most charity employees is just showing that passion for the cause or the mission, whatever that might be. And so I think demonstrating that can only be a good thing. And if demonstrating that means you volunteer, as Joanna said, you know, for the Wildlife Trust, then great. I think if you pursue a career in charity, I know some charities specifically kind of organize. So my sister works for Macmillan, and she gets 2 days a year where she can volunteer to help the charity, you know, shake a bucket or kind of participate in events like that. So different charities have different kind of options there, but yeah, not essential.
Yeah, I'd say the same, as having been on the side of recruiting people and hiring quite a few people into charities. It's never one of our essential or desirable criteria on the job description, so you really don't need that experience. But to sort of back up what Joanna was saying, and so a personal story of mine, I volunteered for charities and learned societies for quite a few years, from when I was a master's student through PhD through postdoc to when I applied for the British Ecological Society. I had never engaged with them ever in my life. I had never done anything with them, but I had with the Royal Entomological Society, which is insect focused. And it was that knowledge and experience of knowing how they were structured, how they worked, having a role on their committees and doing work with them. That knowledge and experience of can work in your favor if you're in an interview situation or in your cover letters or CVs. So it's not essential at all. They are there to see how you meet the criteria of the job description. If you can meet that with any experience you may have, industry, corporate, researcher, you've got it. If you then back that up with some knowledge of your experience with charities, that can work in your favor. And again, like Hannah said, if you believe in their mission and what they do, that's what they want. They want to see why you want that job and why you're the right person for them. So yeah, not essential, but it can help.
Brilliant. We've had a question submitted. So just jumping back to the grant writing question. Is there a difference in the grant writing style within the philanthropy sector? So between academic grants and the grants that you would typically write where you work?
I'll jump on this one. I think one of the main differences is kind of length and amount of technical information. And I mean, I'd say there's a lot of similarities more than anything else. I know Joanna mentioned, you know, that there's actually, you've got a lot of experience from writing academic bids, because I feel like there's almost more information contained in those than perhaps charitable bids. What makes it complex is every funder has a different administrative process. So some funders have very specific forms to fill in, very specific questions to answer. Other funders, they just want you to tell them about the project. So it could be a presentation, it could be a slide deck, it could be a video. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can apply for grant money. I think that maybe charitable grant writing, philanthropy kind of means you can be a little bit more creative, maybe. I don't have a lot of experience with academic grant writing, so maybe Joanna or Chris could maybe do a bit more of a contrast there.
I can definitely say in terms of academic grant writing, it's such a brutal process because these pots of money that are available through NERC or wherever, they're kind of diminishing and the competition's getting really tough. So you can have a really strong application and it still gets knocked back. And it takes an awful long time to do it. And the administrators will look for any mistake just as a reason to try and reject it so that the amount of paperwork's reduced for the reviewers, the kind of academic reviewer panel. So yeah, any experience of that horrible, brutal academic kind of grant schemes is really valuable, I suppose.
Yeah, on Joanna's point about seeing the tiny mistakes, I wrote my postdoctoral position grant during my PhD, and they threw it out first of all because of the incorrect font size, and we appealed. They brought it back, and then we got the funding. So we nearly lost my job based on a font size. So yeah, it can be brutal. But in terms of the style, I would say they do differ. It's very, very technical terms and super, super, super detailed in those scientific applications, but often those panels that are assessing them are generalists with a nominated specialist. I think Joanna, you'd be able to clarify, but so you are still writing it almost for a layman audience, and you've got to make it appeal to as broad a church as possible. And that's where those skills, just like Hannah was saying earlier about that communication skill, you do the same in the philanthropic sector, which is you've got to make sure that you get across your purpose, your mission, and your impact very clearly to as broad a church as possible who may have no prior experience in exactly what you're doing. So that's where I would say that clear communication is really, really key. So the styles do differ, but there are those commonalities in how your communication gets across. And there's, again, those ingredients of what you put into it can be very, very, very similar.
Yeah, I totally agree with Chris. You've got to just clearly put across what you want to achieve, like in layman terms, I guess, but then you also have to justify everything in academic grants. You've got to justify every penny that you're asking for. So yeah, it's
brilliant. Thank you, everyone. We've had another question come in. I'm going to just turn to the questions that were pre-submitted. We'll try and get through those first, and then we'll come back to the one that's been submitted live. So I guess staying on the theme of skills, we've talked a little bit about grant writing skills are great if you have them, but not necessarily prerequisite. Having that passion is really important. How do the skills you need for the job differ from other industry jobs, i.e., is there an emphasis on social and people skills more so than technical skills? And then we'll come on, there's another one that's linked to that, we'll come on to, I think, after you've answered that, otherwise it'll get really confusing.
I might jump in just why, because the thought came into my head. It can be both, I suppose, because one thing that many people think is when you leave academia, your research days are done. But it's really not the case. So you can do research, like proper hardcore research that you were doing in your academic position, but for a charity. So the RSPB, anything, the British Trust of Ornithologists, whatever you name it, they all have research academics, DEFRA as well for government, these kind of things. But within the charity sector, you can still use those exact technical skills that you are using. In conservation, land management, all that kind of thing, those are really technical, hardcore skills. If you have a policy or social science aspect to your degree as well, or your position, those are all used. So that technical specialist knowledge can be used in many, many ways within the charity sector. So it's like doing the same job, but I would say from personal experience, maybe a better work-life balance. So it can be a really, really nice way to use your skills. But also, you are right, it can be totally different skills that you go for as well. It could be that project management focus that you're doing. So how on everything you've done with your research, you are managing huge and important and complex and long-term projects with tons of partners, big budgets, complex mixing, contrasting responsibilities. All of that means you're a really good project manager. And those are the skills that charity sector really love to have. your communication skills, how you write papers, you communicate with external partners and policy people, whoever it may be that you work with, to use the term stakeholders, all those different audiences that you work with. Those are key skills like you've suggested. So I would say that you can use those technical skills, but there are all those other more, that they call them the transferable or soft skills or portable skills, that you can really sell. It's just often in academia, we're not taught about how we've acquired those and how we market those. So once you know you've got them, because you do, then you'll see it's exactly just using the same skills you've always done, but in a different context, and maybe using them more often than some of the technical skills in particular roles.
Who's going to be first? Hannah, you're reaching to unmute.
I was going to say, I really don't have that much to add, to be honest. That was totally agree with Chris on everything he's just said. I think it entirely depends on the role, and there are so many roles in every charity I know. There's so many different roles. Sure, if you're like an event organizer, then maybe yes, people skills and social skills are a little bit more important. If you're a data analyst, then those technical skills are going to be more important. And there's just so much opportunity there. And I think another transferable skill that I thought of was around flexibility. I think in academia, we know when things go wrong, you have to think of a different solution to the problem and changing direction. I have to say that's definitely something I've come across a lot in charity work, just being able to kind of go with the flow a little bit and just kind of have this idea in mind, but actually things do change quite quickly around organizations who are kind of creating that action and the bigger impact that they want to see. But yeah, 100% agree with Chris. Transferable skills are the key.
Just to add to that with the technical experience thing, so in my case, for 16 years, I was very hands-on, digging up soil and taking soil back to the lab to do lots of experiments with. But now at Fidra, I don't do experiments. I don't do that technical stuff. The most I do is like hunting for nurdles and encouraging citizen science type stuff. So yes, perhaps I miss some of that technical stuff, but I know that my career's in a better place with a better work-life balance now. I don't have to go into the lab at midnight to try and conduct an experiment, for example. So yeah, there's definite benefits.
Sorry, Jess, can I add one last thing on that? Which
one? No, please do.
We've talked about the different skills, like either technical or either the other stuff, but actually, if you're doing the other stuff like project management, your knowledge and experience of all the technical stuff actually puts you in an unrivaled position when you're doing those project management skills, because you understand it. You may not have to go in at midnight anymore, but you understand all the people that you're working with have to. And that empathy, as well as just the knowledge of what goes into it, the practicalities, that really does give you an advantage when you're going in from the position that you're all going into. So use it and show how that's one of your unique skills and perspectives that you can do. So it's not either or, it's both. So that's really nice.
That's a really good point. Thanks, Chris. So I'm hoping that also has answered one of the other questions that was sent in ahead of time, which was, is there a job role in your company or sector where I can still do experiments or lab work? So it sounds like, yes, if that's something you are interested in, you want to do that in the charity sector, it sounds like there should be opportunities for you to do that too. So sort of staying with the skills that we need to move into a career in the charity sector, a lot of these things happen as part of your PhD or your postdoc. They're skills that you're accruing, but for somebody who has maybe decided, yes, I want to go and work in the charity sector and I want to do everything I can to make my CV look as good as possible, how can people who want to move over best tailor their studies or their work to develop the skills to be employable in your field? And what are those qualities and those skills? I know we've touched on it a bit, but if you've got anything extra to add to that. First to draw, who's going to be first? Go on, Hannah.
yeah, I don't know what more to add to that other than really looking for those courses to develop those transferable skills. I think, as Chris mentioned, you know, that the process of doing a PhD develops so much that we're just not taught is actually really valuable. A lot of the focus, quite like rightly, is on the science behind what we're doing, but actually the project management, the budget management, the grant writing, the presenting research, the thinking of different solutions to a really complex problem, all of that is so transferable. And obviously I'm biased and I'm going to say it's very transferable to the charity sector. But if you can point to specific certified courses, even just courses that, you know, you've done off your own back, or you said to your supervisor, I really want to improve my storytelling capability. You know, I found this course, I'm going to do that. You know, there might even be budget within the university that will pay for that for your learning and development. You never know. So just things like that. I think I look back at my PhD and I kind of wish that I had done a little bit more of those things, or I wish that someone had sort of said those are an option actually to kind of develop project management. Because at the end of the day, if you're looking to build your CV and, you know, you're not sure entirely which direction you want to go in, then those courses are going to be applicable to pretty much anything that you'll ever do. And especially if you don't have any sort of super relevant work experience as well. I know Chris has mentioned as well, you know, if you've got that passion, maybe you do some volunteering, great, that's fantastic. But if you haven't had that opportunity, or if you kind of feel like it's a little bit of a last minute decision around the direction that you want your career to go, all of those transferable skills are definitely the way to go. I would recommend.
Just need from you totally agree with that. I mean, it's about those transferable skills, and the good thing is just to rattle off a few things that you could investigate if you were wanting to prep your skills. One, work out what you've got already, because like we said, you've typically got tons of it, but we just haven't been taught to know and identify it at the time. So if you go on Vitae, if you've all heard of Vitae through your things, we'll put a link in, I hope, in later. They have an amazing wheel of skills that you gather through your academic experience. Quite jargony, quite technical, but that's the language that people use. And so it's a great way of going into that table and saying, what do I do? Okay, these are the skills I have, and start making an Excel table of all those skills that you think you can demonstrate. Type a couple of notes of the things that you've done that meets those skills, and keep a track of that over the next few months. When you see a job that you want and apply, you've done the work already, your CV's written, your cover letter's there. So just do that. A really easy thing is to go talk to your uni or university or your department career service or research and development contact. They're trained to help you know exactly the skills that you have. And to give you opportunities that may be there for help you to develop new skills. So for example, maybe your PhD or your postdoc has built-in internship time or placement opportunities, or like Hannah said, some funding to explore some pauses and experiencing other things. That they're normally there, but they're normally not massively advertised. So go in and just ask the questions, and you could end up getting a 2-month internship. That could be the seed of getting where you want to go. So just ask and investigate with your career services or department teams. The other thing is just networking, and not in the dark lawyeristic world of how we assume networking might be referred to, but it's just mutual enthusiasm. I like what you do and I wish I could do it too. That's the best way to go at it with someone and say, this is great. Could you teach me about it? Could we have a conversation? Or maybe you want to write a blog for your department or your GLSOC or something like this. That's a great way of getting in to chat people. They want to promote their work and you want to learn and meet people. It can be an easy way of networking, but just reach out to people, which is nice. And then the nice one in terms of identifying the skills that you need, start going on LinkedIn jobs or, environment jobs. There's a lot of geology and earth sciences and geochemical jobs on there as well, or your relevant job posting boards that you know. download job descriptions, even if it's only a little bit going, oh yeah, I'd like to do a bit of that, but not all of it, but a bit of it. Download them anyway. Look at the skills and the roles and responsibilities that appeal to you. Keep the job description somewhere, or keep a list of the things that appeal to you. How many do you have already? Map it onto your Excel sheet of the skills that you think you've acquired. Identify the ones that you don't think you have quite yet, and then you can put your action plan in place to fill those gaps over time. And you don't have to do it all in 2 months. You can split it out over a year, over 2 years. You can do it to fit in with you and your well-being and how much time you have to put towards it. But that's the way to go. I would maybe go about it. Could be really useful. Job descriptions are brilliant, and once they're gone and off a job posting board, you can't find them again. So make sure you just download them and keep them in a folder. They're really invaluable when you go to apply for a job that's similar in future. Sorry, that was a really long answer, but there's lots.
That's okay. That's okay. I think it's good to focus on. We have had another question come through anonymously though, so I'm gonna see if we can. We're tentatively penciled in to finish at 10:02, so I'm gonna see if we can increase the pace a little bit. But Joanna, did you have anything to add to that on the skills front?
Yeah, I would just quickly say anything that's about communicating to policymakers or making your research have an impact. They're really good courses. I did a placement with the British Ecological Society where I got to shadow an MEP. So yeah, little things like that to add to your CV.
Things that sort of make you stand out a little bit. Fab. Okay, so moving on to our submitted questions, and I think this is something where we could talk for a while. So if we don't get to finish it off, then perhaps so all of our panelists today are happy for you to reach out to them on LinkedIn, or if you find a contact for them online. So I would encourage you to do that. They're happy to chat more. Can you describe a bit more detail on the day-to-day of your role? So what do you spend most of your time on? Are there any bits you particularly like or dislike? So if we focus maybe on those 2 specific bits, and Joanna, you look ready to go. So.
Okay, so I'd say the bits I love are kind of writing blogs and doing the research where I have to read some papers about chemical legislation or something like that. It's a good challenge to get your head around and then try and communicate what you find. Feeding into consultations, government consultations is good as well. The bits I probably like least, just because of my age, I'm not as great as social media and doing tweets and Facebook promotions, but I guess that's stuff that I can get the younger project officers to do. So there you go.
Hannah, go on.
I should go. It's a really hard question. What do I like the most and what do I dislike the most? I mean, in terms of my day-to-day role, I can pretty much sum it up as meeting with project teams, planning strategy with directors, organizing events, writing grants, writing reports, impact reports, kind of copywriting, so kind of like training up some of our teams in grant writing so that they can take some of the pressure off of me. And I think the things that I like doing the most at the zoo is getting to be in the zoo when no one else can be in the zoo. I mean, that's just a perk of this specific job. But it's really seeing the impact that a grant that I win has on a project, and kind of having that massive, every grant is such a cooperative thing, that I don't think anyone in charity can really say that they wrote that grant and it was their baby and that's it. It's such a team effort, and I've always preferred working in teams. So yeah, and I think the thing that I like the least, I mean, it sounds weird because it is quite a large part of my role, but I've never seen myself as like a salesman or like a give me your money kind of person. I'm quite an introvert, really, deep down. So I think the thing that I spend the most time preparing for are conversations with major funders, sort of reading the room, knowing exactly when to make the ask. but that's all part of relationship building, which I do really like. So it's kind of a bit of a balance. And I will stop talking now. I'm happy to answer any more questions if anyone has any more questions. Yeah.
How are you all doing for time? I do this so that you have 10 minutes to go make a cup of tea if you have a meeting at 2 or grab a bite of lunch. But if you're happy to stay on, we do have another question that also looks very interesting. So okay, but we'll still try and speed it along. So Chris, what on the likes and dislikes and what you spend your time on, and for either job, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, likes and dislikes. So the likes, what I really loved from switching from academia, with my personal strand of academia, it was quite theoretical and things like this. Only a few people would read the papers I would publish, and I wouldn't see any impact from it in my lifetime. So what I really liked doing was training people, coaching people, mentoring people, seeing those people over a year or two, or hearing them come back 3 or 4 years later, and seeing the difference our activity was making to them. I'm just one of those people that likes to see the impact of my work, because that's what brings me fulfillment. And that this job is what gave me that. I could see the difference it was making. So that's what I really enjoyed. The other thing I really enjoyed was I like communicating verbally and meeting people and being less admin, more communicative. And that was a real big benefit for me. But for the dislikes, I suppose, although we have our own admin load with academia, with applying for things or analysing statistics and all that kind of stuff, there's a lot of admin. I wasn't prepared for the level of emails when I moved into a charity job. So my quickest skill was email management. I'm one of those people, I can whip out a 30-minute training in a morning, but tackle my email inbox to 0 and you got no chance. So that was me.
Brilliant, thank you. So Feb, so we have one more submitted question, which is actually sort of several parts to a question. I'm going to ask them all at once and ask for your input on. What are the salaries like in philanthropy? What does the career ladder look like? And how do you know what level to apply to? So something I think we're not very good at in this country is talking about salaries. So whatever you feel comfortable tackling there. Chris, I was calling you first.
I'm quite open with this because we need to be open with this kind of stuff. So my entry-level position for the British Ecological Society, so straight out of academia, we have interns, assistants, officers, managers. And because I had gone through quite a lot of project management work as an academic, doing my PhD and doing my postdoc, I could go in at the officer level. So, you know, sort of 2 rungs up. And that was equivalent to what my postdoc salary was. So it was about the low 30s or something like this. The BES was actually very competitive with its salaries in terms of the environment sector for a charity. So I was very lucky to get in there. Other charities that maybe were conservation based or things like that, they're stretched. They are very, very stretched. And so their salaries are typically lower. They often sometimes don't advertise them as well when they're applying for those jobs. So do look carefully and investigate that, or talk to people you may know who already work and you're comfortable with. But the charity sector does pay lower eventually, I would say, more or less. But there are some big behemoths where you're going up the ladder, you do actually get quite competitive salaries. And also, you couldn't pay me double to go back to academia. I do it for the impacts, I do it for the lifestyle, I do it for the balance, I do it for the people that you meet and you work with. So I've chosen this, and the salary is livable and it is comfortable, and I'm very lucky compared to many people. So yeah, I think that's a good balance. But Hannah and Joanna, you may be able to add to that, but it's a lifestyle choice that you make, and it is still good.
Yeah, and like I said, we are fun, you know, it's a cultural thing. There's no pressure on anyone to come out with a number, but if you're able to give an idea of the sorts of the salary ranges and stuff, that would be really helpful, I think. So no one wants to go. No, go on, Hannah, you win.
No, it's funny. While Chris was talking, a lot was popping into my head, so I hope I've remembered everything. So I think when it comes to a career, it's interesting the question mentioned career ladder, because I think it depends on the charity. I know a lot of what I'm saying is it depends on the job role, it depends on the charity, but it really does depend on the charity. I know some charities are extremely well set up. There's a kind of hierarchy. It's pretty obvious, like where you kind of move to the more experience you get. But I know some charities are either much younger, like they're much newer. There's not that same organization. They're much smaller. So I think that going into a charity role, I think you just have to just be a little bit careful about how the charity is organized, if there are such things as role bandings or role grading, or if it's kind of I hate those questions on job adverts where they say, tell us your salary expectations. I hate it. And I think that opens up massive opportunity. I don't know if that's the right word, but just potential for discrimination, basically, because certain people are more likely to kind of undersell themselves, some people are more likely to oversell themselves. So I agree with Chris, it definitely would send red flags up in my mind if I was reading a job description and they didn't say what the salary was, or at least what the salary roughly, what the band is. I think that's difficult. I also think when it comes to this remote work, there's more flexibility now, kind of post COVID. I said I wasn't going to say the C word, but there we go. Sorry, everybody. Now there's a more flexibility and there's more opportunity for remote work. Something I did see in the charity that I have just left is they were actually struggling to recruit for some roles that did need that big technical expertise behind them, because they're now competing with people all over the country rather than just kind of in your local area and people kind of living and working in the same place. So that's potentially a good thing for people who are looking for a job, because you've got kind of the competitive edge then. If you have everything they're looking for, you can demand a little bit more from that salary, because actually they need to do their best to attract the right people to achieve their mission and that impact that we keep coming back to. So it's a little bit of a weird seesaw. I can tell you that when I was straight out of academia into my first role as bid writer, prospect researcher, I fell for the old undersell and I definitely should have been paid more, but I was on 28k, just to put that number out there. And yeah, there again, depends on the role. There's definite kind of steps that you can go through to improve, get promoted. But yeah, that would just be something I would say just watch out for in terms of how the charity is organised, if there is somewhere to go.
I'm going to jump in here with my very limited experience and say that when I applied for a role with a charity, and it was the sort of what are you worth, and I said what I was worth, and they said we can't pay you that much, and there it was mid-20s, and I was like, well, I have a PhD and I'm not going lower than X number. So yeah, be upfront about asking these things and be very clear, and you know, based on the fantastic discussion today, like, know your worth, and if you're not sure, ask, because I think I was looking for jobs that I didn't have that confidence to apply for roles that I probably was capable of doing. So if you need a confidence boost from someone, find a friend, get them to push it up. Joanna, have you got anything to add on that?
Yeah, I'll just add, so it's all about experience in Fidra, and the money you get paid kind of reflects the amount of experience you have. So I thought that I would have to take a massive pay cut, to be honest, moving from academia, but based on my experience, they were actually happy to match my salary. So, but I know that I can't progress further. So I've accepted that. I didn't want to become a professor anyway with all that stress. So I'm happy at the level I'm at. But yeah, people should think about how they value themselves. My first job after my PhD was like 26,000, but that was like way back in 2006, starting a postdoc. And yeah, try and fight for more if you can, but sometimes you need the experience to be able to fight for more.
Brilliant. Thank you everyone for answering. We had quite a few live questions today, so thanks for answering those. I would normally ask if you have any very quick advice, or go on 20 seconds each maximum. Any advice for anyone who's looking to leave academia? Yeah, go on, Joanna.
Do it because you'll love your life more. If you're burdened with loads of teaching and admin and you're not enjoying it anymore and you're not getting to do the publications or the bits of research you love, just give it a go and you might be surprised.
Yeah, totally agree. It's all about those transferable skills. Know what you're worth. That was a great quote, Jess. And it's all about that work-life balance. And I mean, I'm ambitious. There are places to go. I feel like we sort of said, oh, you know, we're happy with where we are, but charities, there's just so much opportunity there, and it depends what you want to do. Door is open.
Yeah, same as Joanna and Hannah. Like it was a brilliant step for me personally. It was a life-changing, brilliant step that helped me reclaim a lot of my work-life balance. But one thing I would say is, if you still enjoy it, you can keep going in academia. If you still feel you're gaining, if you still feel you're being supported, if you're still experiencing good things, when the peaks don't outweigh the troughs any longer, that's when you know it's time to move on and you gain a lot of skills. And the other thing is, it's a job. You don't have to work those monstrous hours. That's what our self-pressure puts us into. If you can do your strict boundaries and do that, do it. If someone's pushing you beyond those boundaries, that's when you know it's time to leave. So that's the thing to do. You can treat it as a job as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. I've really enjoyed the conversation today. It's been fantastic. Chris has popped a bit more information in the chat if you want to read through that. And just a reminder that all of our panelists are happy for you to reach out with any more questions, and they are on LinkedIn. But I'm going to wrap us up now as we are at 2 p.m. So yeah, again, just a massive thank you for your time today. And yeah, have a lovely rest of your week.
Thanks so much, Jess, for organising.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye all.